Yesterday, Nelson Mandela died. The Huffington Post was so eager to break the story that they posted their obviously pre-written article without even plugging his age of death into the headline. The conservative Drudge Report was even worse. They didn't even think that Nelson Mandela's death warranted the top story. They thought that Rush Limbaugh changing radio stations in Los Angeles was more important. Rush Limbaugh, Nelson Mandela, Rush Limbaugh, Nelson Mandela, Rush Limbaugh, Nelson Mandela, Rush Limbaugh. Stunning. Nelson Mandela had a couple of things in common with my father. They both spent time in prison, and they both sought comfort in a poem called Invictus by William Ernest Henley. Some of you may recall that after my father's death, as a tribute to him, I read the poem Invictus, and now I would like to do the same thing for Nelson Mandela. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Nelson Mandela spent nearly 3 decades of his life in prison, and when he got out, he became the leader of his country. He basically went from the position of ultimate submissive humility to the position of ultimate political authority. That's not a trajectory that most people get to experience in their lifetime. You know, whether you agreed with Nelson Mandela's politics, whether you believe that he was a great compassionate man or an overrated tyrannical dictator, that doesn't matter at this point because he's dead. What really matters is that through the sheer force of tenacity and will, this man took himself from the lowliest depths of irrelevance to the highest peaks of power. And the most fascinating thing to me about someone like Nelson Mandela is that he wasn't born with some special power denied to the rest of us. He was just a human being with every single human failing that the rest of us have. Why did he achieve so much? Because his head was bloody but unbowed. Because he didn't just read the lyrics of that poem and say, oh, this is look at this nice little rhyme scheme. He believed that shit down in his very bones. He didn't let any sort of trial or tribulation deter him from what he wanted to accomplish. And that's not to say that just because you try, that guarantees that you will succeed. But the more you try and the harder you try, the more likely you are to succeed. And that is the lesson that I take from the life of Nelson Mandela. Setting aside the politics, setting aside all of these issues, I just admire him as a human being for the life he lived. And that's why I don't sit here and mourn his death. I sit here and celebrate his life. I know that's a cliche, but that's really how I look at it. So here is a fond goodbye to Nelson Mandela, whose legacy will hopefully live on for as long as human beings walk and draw breath on the face of this planet. I'm the Amazing Atheist. Peace the fuck out!
What do I think about this brand new system from Sony? Well, it's got solid hardware, it's got a lot under the hood, it's definitely powerful as evidenced by Killzone and a lot of other tech demos they showed at E3 and other events, and it's got probably the best controller on the market in my opinion.